Hi John, hey Jaguars. This is Soof by Sarah Weeks, and we are on chapter 18 and 19 in this episode. More Than a Moon Loves to Rise. Heidi and her baby rode to the hospital in the ambulance, and my mother and I followed behind. We called my father on the way, and he was outside the emergency room waiting for us when we got there. "Why didn't you call me earlier, Rube?" he asked my mother. "I told you already, Roy," she said. "I didn't know where they'd gone. Thank God they left the bikes where I could see them. By the time I got there, Heidi was already starting to push." "It was so scary," I said. "I was afraid she was going to—" "You should have seen our little girl, Roy," my mother said. "Aurora was so calm." "Not inside I wasn't," I said. My father put his arms around me and hugged me so tight I could hardly breathe. "I'm proud of you, baby girl," he said. "Well, that makes two of us," my mother added. "Blah, blah, blah," I said, and I don't know why, but we all laughed. After they got Heidi and the baby checked in and cleaned up, we were allowed to go in and see them. Heidi was lying in the bed and Sophia was wrapped up in a blanket, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "How will I ever thank you?" Heidi said. "We're so grateful you're both okay," said my mother. "Is Sophia all right?" I asked. All right? Heidi's parents had both been mentally challenged, and even though Heidi wasn't that way, I had overheard my parents expressing some concern about the baby when they found out Heidi was expecting. "Rory," my father said, putting a hand on my shoulder, "maybe it's not the best time for questions." "I don't mind," said Heidi. "It's the first thing I asked too, Aurora. The doctor says it's too early to know for sure, but—" "You'll love her no matter what," my mother said. Heidi looked down at her baby and smiled. "No matter what," she agreed. "How much did Sophia weigh?" I asked. 7 pounds even. "Same as that bullhead I caught, right, Dad? Only Sophia is a whole lot cuter." Everybody laughed. We didn't stay very long, and as we were leaving, Heidi asked if she could speak to me alone for a minute. "I want to tell you a secret," she said, "but you have to promise you won't tell anyone." "Okay," I said. "I used to wish that I was you." "You did?" I asked, surprised. Heidi nodded. "Your life seems so perfect compared to mine." "Could have been your life if you'd stayed with my mom and dad," I said. "That's what they wanted you to do, you know, especially my mom." "That wouldn't have been fair. Your mother wanted a baby of her own, and I already had a mama, and Bernadette too. If I'd stayed with your parents, they would have had to settle for me, when it was you that they had been waiting for all along." I let those words wash over me, wiping away my hurt, because I knew they were true. "We could have been sisters if you'd stayed," I said. "We still can," said Heidi. "Sophia could call you Aunt Aurora." There was something I needed to get off my chest. "I'm sorry I was mean to you at first," I told her. "I saw that photograph you sent my mother, and it made me mad. I saw Soof in her eyes." "I see the exact same thing when she looks at you, Aurora. But it doesn't make me mad. It makes me happy. Everyone deserves to have a mama who loves them more than anything in the world." Sophia woke up and started fussing, and a nurse came in to say that visiting hours were over. I hugged Heidi goodbye, and then I kissed Sophia on the top of her head. Her hair smelled like spring. "Soof," I whispered in her tiny, perfect little ear. My parents were waiting out in the hall for me. I could tell they were curious to know what Heidi had wanted to talk to me about, but they didn't press. I wouldn't have known what to tell them anyway. I needed to think about it for a while. My father swung by the lake to pick up the bikes, and my mother and I drove home together. While we pulled up to the house, instead of going inside, we sat in the car for a little bit. "You were really something today," she said. "I know, you told me that already," I said. "How did you know what to do anyway?" "Well, I learned a few things back in nursing school, but that was a long time ago. Mostly I followed my instincts. Besides, you and Heidi had already done all the hard work by the time I got there." We were both quiet for a while, and then my mother took her seatbelt off and turned to face me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," she said. I felt my stomach tighten. "About what?" I asked. "About you." She reached over and took my hand, weaving her long, smooth fingers between mine. "I was 48 years old when you were born. There are risks involved in having a baby that late in life. I took them without thinking about what it might mean to you. That was selfish of me. What are you trying to say, Mom? That you think it's your fault that I'm weird? You're not weird, she said. Yes, I am. That's why you took me to see all those doctors, isn't it? You wanted them to tell you what was wrong with me. Well, it sounds so awful when you put it that way, she said. I just wanted things to be easier for you. Remember what you told Heidi a few minutes ago about Sophia? You said you'll love her no matter what. Well, that's how I feel about you, she said. I always have. I know, I told her, so stop blaming yourself and quit being such a worrywart. I'm okay with the way I am, so could you please be okay with it too? Remember that day in Dr. Harris's office when he said not everything has a name, my mother asked, and you said, I have a name, Aurora? I was pretty smart for such a little kid, huh? Yes, she said, you were. I took off my seatbelt and started to open the door, but then I stopped. Hey, Mom, I said, if I ask you a question, do you promise to give me a true answer? I promise, she said. Do you think I'm weird? She looked at me, and her eyes were sparkling. A little, she said. And for some reason we both started laughing, and once we got going we couldn't stop. Tears were rolling down our cheeks, and by the time my father pulled in behind us with the bikes, we were gasping for air. He knocked on the window, and my mother lowered it. What's going on in there? He asked. Not much, he told him. Just a couple of alley cats enjoying each other's company. Chapter 19. More Than a Dog Loves to Dig. Heidi and Sophia flew home a week later. My father drove them to the airport, and I rode along in the back seat with Sophia. She was growing so fast, the little outfit my mother had bought for her to wear home from the hospital was already getting too tight. There was a song playing on the radio, something twangy on the country western station, and one of the lyrics stuck in my head. I love you more than a bird loves to sing. A few days later, my father came home from work and pulled out his phone. Take a look at this, Rory, he said. He scrolled through his photos until he found what he was looking for. It was a little black puppy with a white stripe running down the middle of his face. There was a woman at the farmer's market with a basket of pups today, and when I saw this one, I asked her if she'd be willing to hold on to him until I had a chance to check with you. He's yours if you want him, baby girl. That puppy looked like just the kind of puppy I would have wanted if I wanted a puppy, but I didn't. I'm not ready, I said, and because my father was the kind of man he was, he nodded and put his phone away. My mother's birthday came around in July, and I was excited to give her the present I'd gotten for her. It was a big glass jar filled with 1,527 jelly beans. Before Heidi had left, I'd asked her if she remembered what color the 6 jelly beans she had eaten had been. How many different colors were there? She asked. 6. Well, I probably ate one of each, she said. That's what I would have done too, I said. I had to ask my father for an advance on my allowance to cover the cost of the jar and the 10 big bags of jelly beans it took to fill it. 423 reds, 393 oranges, 276 greens, 221 yellows, 115 blacks, and 99 pinks. My mother cried when I gave it to her, just like I hoped she would. It had been hot and muggy all week. My mother said she didn't feel like going out to a fancy birthday dinner, so instead she asked my father to pick up a couple of rotisserie chickens on his way home from work. The next morning I found the wishbones drying on the windowsill. It had been a while since I dreamed about Duck, but sometimes I saw him in the clouds. I still missed him like crazy, but eventually the ache began to lessen, and day by day the hole he'd left behind grew smaller. It would never be completely gone. I didn't want it to be. Keeping Duck's memory alive was the least I could do after all he'd given me. A good friend is never an easy thing to lose. Since I couldn't bury Duck, I chose one of his favorite digging spots and made a little pile of stones to mark the place where a piece of my heart would always lie. I had picked a few wildflowers, but instead of making a bouquet, I used the petals and stems to spell out the word Soof. I felt like I should say something, but I didn't know what to say. So I closed my eyes and thought about Duck, and the words of that song came back to me. I love you more than a bird loves to sing, I said softly. Didn't seem like enough. So I kept going, making up more verses as I went. I love you more than a dog loves to dig. I love you more than a fish loves to swim. I love you more than a bell loves to ring. The words kept coming because when you love someone as much as I love that dog, there aren't enough words in the world to tell them how you feel. That's the end of chapter 19, and I guess now we've learned why the chapter headings were what they were. We have one more chapter to go, and that will be in the next episode.